Okay, time out. We're going to get through this. Thank God it's a Saturday, right?
Okay, we're going.
Okay, we're going again. First talk after lunch. I'll try to keep you awake. Normally, I like to have some cool technical stuff, but I'm coming today in a little bit of a different capacity. Actually, this whole year, I've taken a personal step away from presenting a lot of technical material, especially, following Dave and Adrian, that can tend to be a little daunting and difficult, right? But I'm here for a call to action. Hopefully to motivate you, myself, each other to do some things differently. And that kind of makes me a little nervous. So please remember that this is supposed to be a discussion. I'm hopeful to get some feedback. I'm not here to lecture you. God knows I'm not a college professor. I'm not much of a teacher, although I played one on TV. Most of you know who I am. I see a lot of familiar faces. Some of you don't, so I'm going to kind of glaze over this real quick. My name's Phil Grimes. They call me the Grape Ape, but I am a hacker by nature. I've got a lot of experience in manipulating different systems, and it kind of seems to run in my bloodline. I've actually found that I've got pirate blood in me. My sister did an Ancestry.com family tree and traced us back to some English pirate in the 1580s, which I think is really awesome. I've been a martial artist since I was able to take instruction. I think I was 5 the first time I started karate, and I've been really training lifelong since. I'm also a biker. Most of you who follow me know this. I would have been riding today, except you might have noticed I was a little late for my time slot on the schedule. I was riding home from New York last night, and my wisdom teeth decided to act up. So I lost vision in my right eye while I was riding, which is dangerous enough in a car, but safety first, right? So I had to stop for a little while, but we'll get that fixed. But I love to ride, and the thing about this is, it gives you the opportunity to kind of deal with a lot of different systems in life. Talking about being a martial artist, right? I've studied everything from karate, boxing, aikido, hapkido. I could talk all day long about different styles. Yeah, right? But martial arts is all about taking a system, and in most cases that's a system of attack, and defending yourself. How to manipulate that offensive system into something that is beneficial to your defense, right? Being a biker, I'm big and ugly enough, but you throw a leather vest on and put a motorcycle under me and people all of a sudden tend to get a little bit more nervous than usual. But that helps me to learn how to manipulate and understand the social system, right? To make sure that people realize that we're not all the bad guys. We're not all out there, shooting up a bunch of people in a public place, that we do actually do things for the benefit of good. We do a lot of charity rides. Actually, my club recently just donated a huge amount of money to the Muscular Dystrophy Association. It was the largest in the state of Virginia for the year. So, we do a lot to help the community and change perception. I'm also a parent. Parents in here? Anybody in here who has kids, you know that being a parent is nothing more than a lifelong social engineering experiment. So learning how to... Yes. It depends on who's better. My oldest, we've kind of got each other figured out, so that's a stalemate, but the youngest, I can still usually get one by her every once in a while, although I find myself on the losing end more often than not these days. But why this is all important, it all ties together to illustrate that I am, when you say the word hacker, I consider myself that. A hacker isn't the bad guy that's out there doing bad things, necessarily. The hacker is someone who is taking a system and using it, manipulating it in a different way, learning how to do different things than something was intended, if that makes much sense. And that's kind of the spirit. Even though we're not talking about flipping bits and exploiting a vulnerability or popping a box, we're talking about a problem that I'm sure each of us can identify within our professional lives. And that's the fact that we really have a hard time getting quality successors, quality help. We find a lot of people coming out of school who really can't operate their way out of a paper bag. We find a lot of people who don't make it to school for whatever reason and have talent that tend to get overlooked. And what I want to talk about today is trying to fix the root of this problem, trying to get each of us involved into doing something differently. Now, we're in an increasingly technologically dependent society. And what I mean by that is most of us in this room, I look around and I see several of you are on your devices, right? We're constantly doing something. We're constantly connected. And for those parents or uncles, aunts in the room, we see our kids are even more so. I was watching a kid just 2 nights ago at dinner. Kid couldn't have been 3 years old, was operating an iPad better than my 63-year-old father. I mean, that's pretty impressive. I actually had a friend send me a mobile video of his kid who was able to crack his password on his iPad because the smudge on the screen was there, right? So kids are smart. They're really smart. And when we give them this power, we see that they really understand the fundamentals of operations, but because we don't foster the growth, we don't show them what we need, a lot of times they lose interest or don't realize that they have interest in these things. We have the opportunity to bring them into the cusp from an early age. And I'm not talking about just from the parental role, but I myself have been doing a lot of mentoring, working with programs that we'll talk about here today briefly, and hopefully some of you may decide to get involved in. But the general idea is that we are we are Morpheus. And we have to bring these little Neos into the fold here and give them the opportunity to realize that there is no spoon, so to speak. Okay? Giving them the keys is different today than it was in the past, because how many people do we have that grew up or came around IRC back in the late 80s, early 90s? Underground hackers. And when you'd go into some of these places and you'd start asking, hey, how do I do, SQL injection, whatever? You don't really get the most positive of feedback. A lot of times you get kicked off the channel or, some derogatory comments, and that only leads people down the wrong path. It tends to, if I can't do something in a safe manner, I'm going to go find someplace else to learn my skills, and we start to see a progression down the wrong road, so to speak. We've seen this infographic floating around the internet for quite a while now. This makes me laugh, but the sad part is there's some element of truth to it, right? If we want to come out and be a Kevin Mitnick, for example, right? We're going to follow one of these paths. A lot of times, if you want to do it the right way, you're going to find yourself in the position to, A, have a lot of debt, and B, spend years getting to the point where not only you can dig yourself out from under that debt, but really to where you've earned the education that you've paid for. Because a lot of times once you come out, the skills that you put to practice in theory don't always apply to the organization that you're trying to protect or attack, depending on your stance in the community. But this illustrates a serious problem that we have, because there really is no middle ground. There really isn't much in the way of an in-between. Fortunately, through venues like this, we as a community, we're slowly starting to see that change. But it's going to take a while, because we're still kind of broken. A lot of us want to keep our secrets guarded. It's job security, right? Now we see awesome people like Dave Kennedy get up here and show us some really cool techniques that wouldn't have happened 15, 20 years ago. Those were closely guarded secrets that people really didn't want, the underground really didn't want to share, because that's how they broke stuff. The problem with no middle ground is that it brings us to things that aren't necessarily good. Now, I will say that, the general concept of anonymous, I think, is a good thing, right? To look out for the little guy, to try to do the right thing, to try to help, I believe is the ultimate message of such a group. But we have, just like in the biker world, right? You have the good guys and the bad guys. You've got some guys that are shooting up public places. You've got other guys that are doing the right things. You've got people that are out catching pedophiles, for example. And then you've got, like, LulzSec. Okay? We've got these extremes, but there's very few opportunities for these kids to go to in the middle. And that's what we need to help with. Because if we give our time and our knowledge sharing to these people, then they're going to start to see, maybe I have an interest in being a red teamer. Maybe I want to go be a pen tester. No, maybe I really just want to be a network architect. Maybe I want to go build software. If they don't get the opportunity to experience this until they're locked into a college major, a lot of times that really can kind of locks them, pigeonholes them, so to speak. And you don't have much of an opportunity to go back. Then you find yourself in the position of, well, I started a career, I didn't really like it, I've got this $100,000 in debt, do I really want to live the rest of my life miserable, or do I want to try to make a change? And then you've got another battle to fight. So we have to find a way to be able to offer these kids an alternative. And I'm going to use my personal story today to kind of illustrate the way things were and the way things kind of need to be. So I got my first computer 1988, and it really wasn't mine, family computer, but my mom was a CPA assistant at the time, so she usually had to bring a lot of work home. I didn't really get to play with it too often unless I would sneak on and try to play a game or something, but back then it was all DOS, right? There really wasn't much to play with at the time. You could play some games, she could do whatever work she did, I didn't really know, but you know, personal computing was still so new, not because of availability so much as because of cost, which I guess is a form of availability maybe. But the point being that a lot of this stuff really, security-wise, operations-wise, you didn't really think about it because there wasn't much. It was just your standalone box for the most part. Things happening there. Mom was doing her thing. I'd play a game. But there really wasn't a whole lot to do with the first computer that I got experience with. Then we started, I got curious, I got bored of the games, and I wanted to know, you know, how does this machine operate? Why is it when I stick that disk in and I start giving these commands, why does it do what it does? And then I learned a little bit of basic programming, started learning how the file systems would work, and just learning how the machine operated. But there was still no networking, right? It was still just my machine. I was still only able to operate on the local machine. And that was a lot of fun. But when the internet came into my house, that was like a main line. I mean, that was the beginning of my addiction. Having the opportunity to touch machines all across the world was, mind-boggling to me at 12, 13 years old. Being able to read documents from colleges that I would never be admitted to because at the time my GPA was so low, I was lucky to be able to stay in a current grade. That was astonishing. Just being able to learn new languages, see what was happening in different areas of research. Even though I really don't know much about it, astrophysics kind of fascinates me. So being able to read some of the documents from like Mikio Kaku and so forth, that was really, that was important to me. And I got addicted to that connection. And then when I discovered CompuServe and like BBS, then it went even bigger. Because now I could socialize. Not only was I able to pretty much read whatever was out there, but I had friends. I had people that like to hang out online. Started hanging out on IRC. Started learning about, how to do some nefarious things. Watching IRC channel flooders come through just was fascinating to me because if somebody was aggravating you in the channel, you just kick them out. Being able to, that evolved, my progression slowly went from CompuServe and AOL into, I started playing a little more on Yahoo chat rooms and stuff. Being able to create my own tools to do some of these things, like kick people out of those chat rooms if they aggravated me, or one of the fun things to do when they had voice capabilities came into Yahoo in the mid to late 90s. Being able to come into a chat room and just lock the microphone down so nobody else could talk on it, right? It was like my own personal radio show. That stuff was fascinating to me. But because of my influence, being these people from the underground that were doing it all, I kind of went about it in the wrong way. I didn't really know that there was an opportunity to make this a career. So it just tended to be a hobby where I was breaking things that I shouldn't because I didn't know any better. I didn't have any positive influence, and I didn't have an arena to be able to build and test my skills and theory in a safe and practical manner. But again, this was my addiction. It sent me on an endless quest for knowledge. Even today, here we are nearly 20 years later, and I'm thirsty every day. I want to learn and to understand why things are happening. How does that work, and how can I bend it or break it to use it either against you or at the very least to my advantage. These are the things that I think a lot of us, it keeps us in our business, because we find that we enjoy what we're doing to some extent, and we want to do better. We want to do more. We want to be better and different and bigger and faster, more efficient, right? If you're not, you wouldn't be sitting here on a Saturday afternoon listening to me talk. You wouldn't be devoting a beautiful day to sitting inside. We'd be outside riding our bikes. This is where the real problem is, right? Now we've got to figure out how to bridge the gap. Most of the time, when I was coming up, you'd be on an IRC channel, I would go in to ask some kind of a question, and this was exactly the response that I would get. Those of you that raised your hand earlier and said you came about on IRC, who did not see this message? Okay, right, no hands. Everybody saw it at least once. I can't speak for anybody else. Again, this is my personal experience, right? When I would encounter this, it put me in a mode of almost shutdown. I was embarrassed. I didn't want to seem like an idiot. These were people that I respected. These were people that I watched do some really cool things online. I didn't want to be the idiot who I could barely tie my shoes, who let you sit in front of a keyboard, right? So I would, after a couple times of realizing that that was the standard canned response that I was going to get, I stopped asking questions. The only problem with that is it puts us in a state of almost a loop back, like you can't get out of it. I don't want to ask the question, but I have this unquenchable thirst to learn. Well, there's no place safe to do it, so I'm going to go find someplace. And then that almost invariably brings us back to the next problem. So we've got this endless, vicious cycle of, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'll be damned if I'm going to let somebody stop me just because they don't want to share their secrets. Now, fortunately, we aren't seeing that so much these days. Fortunately, we have a wonderful security community where unless you're doing the wrong thing, we're happy to help. We're happy to share knowledge. That's why we're here. It's fantastic to me to see the evolution of being in IRC and being bashed for, hey, go back and read that manual again, to things like today where if I'm having a problem, I can reach out to countless friends on Twitter and have an answer pretty darn quickly. But we need to take that to the next level. We really need to take that to the next level and start offering our time and our expertise. I'm asking you to give something free, okay? I'm not a salesman. Those of you who know me, you know that I am a breaker. That's really all I do. I'm not asking you to buy anything. I'm not asking you to do anything other than to offer your time and what you know. Mentor these kids, because this is a terrible place to be stuck, and we find a lot of resources get lost. A lot of really great talent gets lost in the shuffle here because they just don't have the avenues to bring them where we need them. I really want the kids who take good risk. I really want kids who are willing to think outside of the box. Do I have any teachers in here? Okay, so I apologize in advance. Don't jump me after the talk. Our education system sucks. It is absolutely broken. It is completely terrible. As a parent of 3 adult children now, my son just turned 18 a couple weeks ago, yeah. 3 adult children and 2 kids that are still going through the public education process, it's so upside down and backwards. They don't have the opportunity to do this. If you take a risk, you get detention. If you do something, if you think outside of the box, you lose points. Right? If I'm your teacher, you come, you sit in my class, I put the data in your brain, you store it, and then recall it later and throw it back out on paper. That's all we teach our kids. Because then they graduate, they go to work, they sit at their desk, they do their data entry, they go home, they pay their bills, they're good little cogs in the machine. This can't stand because there are other parts in the world where that's not happening. North Korea, China, right? Just to name a few, where that's not happening. We need these people. We need not only to identify them, but we need to, I don't want to say reward, because doing that kind of stifles the average. That's not what we're trying to do here. But we need to identify and encourage these kids and give them a safe place to build these skills and make it fun so they don't get bored. I was actually not supposed to be giving this talk. If you follow me on Twitter, I do a lot of work with the Cyber Patriot program, which we'll talk about here in the next couple slides a little more. My team was actually, my high school boys were supposed to come and give this talk, but it's summer. I was supposed to be driving at 6 o'clock in the morning had I not had my snafu. They're teenage boys. They're off chasing girls at the pool, working, right? Because it's not always fun enough for them. They still have their priorities, but we have to be able to get them. When I've identified this talent, I've got some really, really sharp kids that we are going to see in these seats within the next 5 to 7 years, okay? If each of us can do that, then we're able to slowly retire and move on in our careers, knowing that we've trained replacements and that we've got quality replacements. We've got kids who understand the fundamentals. Now, I'm not saying everyone's going to be a pen tester. I'm not saying everyone's going to go out and be a CISO, okay? I'm not saying that this is going to be a constant focus for these kids. Tastes change, they decide that they want to do something for a day or two, and then they move on to other things. But if we are consistent in offering them the arena to build, then while they may not all be practitioners, we will find those who do intend to be. And on top of that, the ones who are, let's say they participate for a little bit, they learn the fundamentals of security while we're building this into our educational process. Then we start to see our ground forces, our general employees, right? When they're sitting at their workstations, they're getting ready to change their password because their 90 days is up. They realize, oh wait, password 123 really isn't the good way to go. Because I remember back in school, we learned what best practices are. Now I graduated in 1998, and they did not teach this anymore. So if you graduated before high school, before 1998, were you taught how to balance a checkbook, do taxes, things like that? Those are things that my kids would have no clue how to do if it wasn't something I taught them. And while we teach them how to turn their Mac on, we teach them how to surf the internet, we teach them how to check email, do we really teach them what a local security policy is? Do we really teach them what the TCP/IP stack looks like? Right? Giving them these building blocks, you see the spark in their eyes, and it's fantastic to watch a kid get it and then kind of feel the passion. The Circle City Con just happened 4 weeks ago out in Indianapolis, and I got to step in to do a workshop and teach some basic web app hacking to some kids. And the questions that they were learning, to see it just click, and to hear the feedback and to watch them playing with Burp and doing some cross-site scripting exploitation and to start to understand what was really going on was a really warm feeling for me, because it's like these kids didn't have hardly any idea what to do with a browser other than operate Facebook when they came in. Now they can have an intelligent conversation with you about SQL injection and cross-site scripting. Plus, they can actually exploit some of it. Well, he didn't go into SQL injection, but some of it, right? We have to be able to bring them someplace safe. I know we have hack this site and root this box and CCDC. We have things that do this, but there isn't much of a drive to bring the kids in that direction. And that's the kind of thing that I'm hoping today you might be a little bit interested in. We've got to foster the creativity and break the cycle of the input-output that we have in our education system today. The thing is, you get a lot of kickback. My teachers here will be able to tell you, your administration is not going to support that, right? You can't change the standard testing models. You can't change the way things do happen in your school most of the time. So that's why we need to, ourselves, think outside the box. We need to get involved with these programs and bring them to our schools to be able to make them understand the resources that we're wasting. I work with a local school district who's actually been cited in President Obama's bills on the STEM schools, which is really awesome because that shows that we're getting federal attention. It's starting to take hold. But we have to push it into the schools, because even though we have a STEM school, they're still only doing math and maybe a computer class here and there. They're not looking at the future of IT. They're not looking on any level as far as what security is. And if we're able to give a little bit of time and to bring these programs to our kids to get a little interest, to our schools who have interest and can get the money to support some of this stuff, we're going to slowly start seeing that we can take the baby steps to get where we want to be. So again, this is my call to action. This is me asking, what does the future look like in your eyes? What do you want when you retire or change, take your next promotion or change jobs? What will it take for you to walk away? If any of you in here are like me, what's it going to take for you to take your next vacation peacefully? How about that? Right? That's an even better question to ask, because then we're not checking our email every 5 seconds. We can actually put our devices away and spend time with our family. Well, I've identified a few programs up here that really do get kids involved. The one I want to talk about first is First Robotics. Did anybody participate or hear of First Robotics or First Lego League? I got one in here, a couple. All right, some hands coming, good. This program is amazing. I was turned on to First a few years ago with Team 4085, and it was amazing to watch a team of 60 kids come together and devote their time. I watched these kids live at school, spend Friday nights till midnight, all day Saturday, all day Sunday, back in class at 7 o'clock Monday morning, because they loved what they were doing. They were with their peers. They built a business from community outreach to design to building this robot from the ground up, and then they put the thing in competition. And I mean, to stand back and watch, it's fantastic. I've been a mentor with this team for 3 years now, teaching some programming, and watching their growth has been, I mean, so heartwarming for me, but really, again, to see them go from, I barely know how to turn a wrench to now I'm a SolidWorks master and I'm printing parts for a robot off of a 3D printer. It's awesome to see that. And this program, First Robotics, gives them that opportunity and then puts them in competition and lets them have metrics for how to improve. Your robot didn't do so well. You see some other designs that work better. We change and do something like that next year. And this goes all the way down into, I believe, the middle school level with the First Lego League, where they actually build robots with Legos, like real working robots with Legos, and do a very similar thing. Put them into a competition and let the kids test their designs. The Global Cyber Olympics, I haven't actually gotten involved with that yet. That's something that my Cyber Patriot team is working on, building their skills to. But it's supposed to be a capture the flag-esque type game, from my understanding. The one that's most near and dear to my heart, though, that I want to talk about is the Cyber Patriot program. The Air Force Association started the Cyber Patriot program. We're actually just getting to start into the 8th season now. And this is so important to me because it focuses on teaching fundamental skills in terms of defense. So that's where you start teaching the kids what local security policy is. They start understanding what best practices are for how to configure a machine. They start learning how to identify vulnerabilities or policy violations on a local machine. And all of this stuff gets scored, and it lets them work together as a team, and it forces them to learn things like how to build virtual machines, how to build a system with flaws in it, and then to go back and fix those and kind of exchange that information. It gives them a safe place to build the stuff that we work with on a pretty regular basis. And that's so nice to me because it allows them to not be afraid to ask questions. The first year that we did it, they were kind of like deer in the headlights. I mean, these kids had no clue about security at all. We had to learn everything from literally why password 123 is not a good password, up to registry editing, and which for a high school kid can be a daunting task. Some of you out there nodding your heads, maybe a daunting task for some adults that we might know, right? So it's nice that they can nuke a machine, and realize, oh, I've got a snapshot, I can revert. Let's go back and relearn. What did I do wrong? They can share, their mistakes. I had a kid was he was changing the password. So the password policy required you have strong passwords. Every user had to have a password, but none of the users on this machine had a password set. So he was going back through and manually, entering the passwords for all these users. But he fat-fingered one twice, apparently. And when he logged out, he forgot how he had typed the password, so he totally wasn't able to access the machine again. Unfortunately, that was the local admin account that he did it through. So he had to nuke that and start all over. So he hosed the team's points, and he had to start all over. But that was a valuable learning experience for them because they learned why password vaults are so critical, right? We start to learn that double checking is a good thing, that quality assurance is necessary in terms of security. And now we're entering, this will be our third season to compete, starting in September, and we actually won the state division last year. So in our second year, being able to claim, going from 0 to one of the best in the state is fantastic. And that's the kind of stuff that it takes time, because our teachers are already overworked, aren't you? You already got enough to do. So for us to say, here, take this and teach my kids something else isn't really fair. Not only that, but if you do it, your hands are probably bound by what the Department of Education allows. But if we come and introduce these programs to the Board of Education, you'd be amazed at how receptive they are. The first time I talked about Cyber Patriot to it wasn't the superintendent, it was the dean of the school, of the STEM school. And before I even got the sentence completed, she said yes. As it turned out, the school she came from before was also a regional champion for the game, so she knew all about it. Her son was on the team. So I had full support. I was given a teacher who would be my advisor through the process, and then she let me run with it. And since then, I've been able to turn the team over to fully operate on their own. Teach them how to work remotely, run it like a lot of us operate at work, give them clear expectations and the resources to do what you need. And it's amazing how much time, effort, and energy they'll really put in if they fit into the categories we're looking for. A lot of them wash out. That's okay, right? It's not like we require it. It's not like you're a bad person because you don't want to be in tech. But at least they start to understand, they start to think about password security. They start to think about password reuse. They start to think about things that the average users just don't think about because we aren't sharing the information. And the wider, broader base that we can do that with, the more people we can touch and build those forethoughts into, the more likely it is that we're not going to see password 123 continuing to happen. And the more we can beat that into their minds, eventually we see programmers might stop allowing SQL injection to happen, right? So there are wonderful opportunities for these kids, and not only at the school level. So I've even got businesses. I've got my state board of education is involved in this now. I've got interest from several pretty large businesses who are looking to foster not only giving the arenas, but giving kids opportunities to go visit conferences, to go speak at conferences. I wish they would have been here. I'm talking to these guys in the camera because I know they'll be watching eventually. Giving the opportunities not only to build the skills, but then to put them into practice. We've got businesses offering internships even for some of these kids. So there are opportunities for them to grow. The only problem is we have to serve as the bridge over that gap to get them there. Because a lot of my kids don't know much about conference type situations or CTF. They don't know about being able to submit papers to pass their knowledge along. They don't know that there's actually a conference that's built just for kids. Hack for Kids, if any of you have kids that are interested, Hack for Kids, yeah, Ben's got the sticker. Hack for Kids is a wonderful conference. They just had their second year week before? 2 weeks? Last weekend? Yeah. And it's awesome to watch these kids come in, and I think they got to learn things like how to use air crack, right? How to crack wireless. They got to learn how to pick locks. They got to learn all kinds of really cool stuff. And that sparks some knowledge. You start to see them want to come back. I know a lot of their talks even had something to do with Minecraft, at least last year, right? Because that's something that kids are into. They like the gaming, so if you can gamify something and put it on a level that keeps and captivates their interest, then you're able to slowly start pulling them in the directions that they want to go, even though they may not realize that they want to go yet. So another thing, we've got these hacker playgrounds, hack this box, root this site. There's a bunch of these things which have been around forever. And that's all wonderful, because it gives them, again, that safe place to be able to test and to build these skills. But a lot of times they don't know about it. I mean, hack this site's been around since well before I started playing around. And there's wonderful information that you can learn there. Even sites like Iron Geek's website, that's one of my best resources too. While I was learning a lot of things, to be able to go and see what people are actually doing, to be able to go and actually interact, to show up at a conference and say, "Oh, hey, I read your blog post on XYZ. That was fantastic." To be able to meet somebody who's the creator of a tool that does some pretty serious damage in the pen testing world, and unfortunately in the underground we've seen sometimes. We just have to be able to give them the opportunity, show them that it's there, help them realize that there are options, and that it's okay to not just regurgitate what's been stuffed down your mind by your teachers. These are the things that we've got to start focusing our children on, and give them at least the opportunity to say, "No, that's not for me." Question?
Yeah, so I think from the parents, but there's only so much control that the educators themselves are stuff about what they can and not. So especially at the collegiate level, let's not even get into the elementary, the collegiate level, talk about bad programs, whatever. A lot of the professors are in there, they've been in for 35 years, the same thing we always taught. So how do you begin to change that environment? The students may have a desire to learn based on what they've seen from us, but how do you begin changing the professors or teaching it so that they get rid of all these old bad habits and activities?
Great question, and it kind of works towards organic growth. Let's say that we all start on Monday. We all make contact with someone on Monday, and we were able to get one of these programs introduced to our school system. It's not so much that you're going to flip a switch and tomorrow everything's better, okay? But it's, if I'm working, so I'll give you a good example. I'll try to illustrate this with yet another story. I'm starting, the Cyber Patriot has a middle school program that I'm getting introduced into my school this season. So to start them in middle school, to progress that through high school, then to move into college with CCDC. While these kids, we still understand we have to pass our test. You have to do what the professor's looking for. But they're learning the real way to do it. So while you're passing your test, you're saying deep down, I know that's not right. You've been there, I'm sure, right? So eventually, they graduate college. They work their way up the food chain. They become managers, right? And these skills tend to carry over with them. So while you're doing that, you're satiating the need to pass by doing the wrong thing. You're still learning the right way to do it. And when you get out in the world and you're in a career, you say, "Well, I know how to do it the wrong way, but this is how we should." And slowly, that manager becomes the supervisor. The supervisor becomes the CIO. The CIO becomes retired and maybe goes back to that college to be the professor. So it may take us 20, 30 years to get where we need to be. And even longer, because I guarantee that not everybody in here will, not everyone, even fewer can, to be able to go and spend the time that's needed. We're all busy. I know I work 80, 90-hour weeks, right? To be able to go and give extra time on top of that to sit in a classroom and help and try to push these kids is not easy. But if we make a concerted effort over time, I think that we'll get there, because the professors that are doing it the wrong way are going to retire, and slowly our people with better fundamentals will take those places. And that is fixing, hopefully, the root cause. I didn't see who had their hand up first, so I'm going to go ahead. Absolutely. And to that point specifically, I can't tell you how many times I've seen somebody come out of school with their shiny new degree, and I have to really teach them how to do the job. I see a lot of head nodding. We all have been there, right? And that's the case. So another good example using myself. I don't carry any professional certifications. I refuse. Okay? I won't do it. I've taught people. I've seen them pass. I know the material, but I refuse to stack those letters behind my name simply for one reason. Because if you want a bad guy who knows the things that the bad guys are doing, who's going to come in and do the things that the bad guys are doing, that's me. You're not going to get a CISSP to come in. I've got people I work with at CISSP that can't practice their way out of a wet paper bag. Okay? So that's exactly the point. School doesn't mean anything other than giving you the diploma to get you past HR. And you're next, sir. Agreed. Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. Critical thinking, you hit the nail on the head with that phrase, and that's something that we stifle in school. That's something that we look down on. I don't have a college degree. I did a quarter in school and decided that that wasn't the right path for me. It doesn't take college. What it takes is somebody that doesn't let that get beat out of them. I mean, I went through most of school with under a 3-point GPA. I mean, there were some times when I was lucky to be able to pass on to the next grade, right? And a lot of that was because I was bored. I could do the material, I just didn't want to. If my mom was in here, she'd be able to tell you how many times I did the homework. She sat and watched me do the homework. I just wouldn't turn it in because I didn't care. I didn't want to be there. If I learned an expressive way to be able to show that I'm smart, I would be so much further ahead. And that's what we're offering here. We aren't going to necessarily be able to change the paradigm of what schools look like overnight. But like I said, I have the State Board of Education involved for Ohio. They're looking at building what they're calling pathways into their STEM schools. So that if you wanted to go into InfoSec, for example, you've got your gen ed classes, you've got to take math, you've got to take reading or history, but they start giving you more tailored classes around using those skills. So we're slowly starting to see that work its way into the curriculum of a school our president has already got his eyes on. So hopefully we're going to see that start to creep into the mainstream, but it's not going to be easy. And it's not something that just I can do. We have to do it together as a community. But you're right. To be able to bring this back and to show them, hey, learn. Don't just spit back what somebody else knows. Go learn. That's going to be the solution. Sir. That's something I actually hadn't even thought about, and I might get kicked at home for it because my sister and my brother-in-law homeschool their 5 kids, so that's quite a plausible avenue. I think that is a fantastic option, and Cyber Patriot actually does include the homeschools in their they have 2 divisions. One is like junior ROTC and military schools, and then the other is public schools where they also include the homeschool schools. So they have that avenue. And any of you that have connections to that sounds like a viable idea. I know for me personally, putting my 5 kids through homeschool wouldn't have been feasible because, while I was building my career, I needed the second income. So to be able, I hate to say that I myself have been part of the problem in my younger days, but sometimes school ends up being daycare. We have to send the kids off because I can't have a parent that's going to be at home to teach. But if you have connections and if you are connected to homeschool and interested, please reach out because they do excel pretty well. I know my nieces and nephew are smart for their age, and I attribute a lot of that to my sister being home with them and being able to get them through that program. Yes, sir. I did. I don't expect them to, and that's not what I'm saying. And I'm not here to bash the school system. I'm here to say that it's broken. Do you disagree with that fact? Okay. I agree with that statement. I'm not saying down with the schools, burn them all, right? That's certainly not the way that that's going to work. We need education. The process needs to change. It is broken, and unfortunately it's broken because school is a business and it comes down to money at the end of the day, just like everything else does. It comes down to the almighty dollar. And I'm not saying to disregard, but to work in conjunction. That's why I promote doing this with the schools as a partner, because I've gone from having no experience and knowledge in the matter to now having regular meetings with superintendents, to regular meetings with teachers. I have a lot of people that are writing curriculums. We're seeing this evolve, and that's gonna come from a hand-to-hand relationship with parents who support their kids to give their time and to make sure that the kids are following through at home on some level, from the teachers to be able to help support the programs, from our administrators to be able to allow the programs into the schools, and from us as professionals to bring our skills and to donate that time. So, forgive me if it comes off like I'm bashing. That certainly isn't the intent on any level, other than to say that, over my oldest is about to be 21 in January. Over my 21 years of being a parent, I've had a lot more stress from the educational process, and it's because I have disregarded school personally because it's so much easier for me to think outside the box and accomplish the same thing differently. So it's not something that should be totally done away with. That wasn't my message. I apologize if you took it that way. Ben?
Going off that, there's a social stigma to critical thinking in a lot of different ways. So, one of my oldest was 7, and a rock you got him on a rock for his birthday party. Your 7-year-old party, you got a rock that's the best thing besides the story. And everyone's like, they're like, well, why are you doing that? What happens if you break into a lock in your house? I'm like, well, then I'm not doing my security right if a 7-year-old can break into my house. So, but how do you get past that social stigma? And I think part of that goes from the education system is that this will know anything else is not really good. We're an educator, we've been doing this for 35 years, so this is the proper way to do it. So how do you break that social stigma, especially when you get burp suite and attach to the website. Everyone looks at that as you're just teaching them how to.
Well, so first of all, that comes from making it socially acceptable. So the more of us that are teaching our kids that, the less likely it is that our kids are going to say, well, why the hell do you have a lock? Right? Oh, cool. Let me pick that. Right? So I think that's one way to start spreading it and to lessen the stigma. But I also think that if by bridging the gaps that we see from school to home, from school to business, from student to student, we'll slowly wash that out. And it's similar to the organic growth that I see by making these things mainstream. Eventually, it just becomes commonplace. Where, I mean, any of us, if we saw Adrian's using password 123, we'd all give him pretty several loads of hell probably for it, right? But for a general user, we expect dumb. So slowly seeing it wash out really only comes from getting involved and making changes. Yeah. So I'm going to... I want to take that one step further, and this part I don't. I know that there's a lot of talk one way or the other about guns, but guns kill people. So I'm going to use this in terms of firearms. I've been around guns my entire life. My dad was a cop for 27 years. I used to load and unload his duty weapon when he'd come home. 3 years old, I was cleaning guns. 5 years old, I was on the range. I've been a combat shooter since I've been old enough to be allowed on the range. Okay? Doing anything can be done right or wrong. Be that lockpicking, martial arts, shooting a gun, or using burp suite. It's all in the terms of context. So, for example, when I did the web app hacking workshop at Circle CityCon, I told the kids flat out, this is for education. You can go and do this stuff, but we need to do it legally, morally, ethically. If you can't get behind those things, get out now. I'm telling you this in front of your parents in no uncertain terms, because if you can't do this, use the knowledge responsibly, you don't deserve the knowledge. But that goes with anything. I mean, we have senseless shootings, stabbings, beatings every day, okay? Bad things happen. We're going to have that certain element. But again, the more mainstream this stuff becomes, the more our defenders are out there able to help us mitigate those risks, and eventually we are all unhackable. No laugh from that? Not even one? Tough crowd. Yeah. Absolutely. And when I did that workshop, every parent that was in the workshop came up after, and I really appreciate you doing this, and thank you for telling them, because I had one parent that had two teenage boys that were, snickering and having a great old time, but he came back and he said, they really seem to get it, and I don't think that they would, abuse this the same way that they would, a pocket knife in some cases, right? They might not be cutting up furniture with it. They're doing it the right way because you're making it clear how important it is. I hate, I'm going to go back to the gun thing. There was a 3-year-old lost his life in the matter of the past weeks because he pulled a pistol out of his mother's purse and shot himself in the face with it. That's a terrible thing to hear. As a parent, it hurts my heart. As a son, it scares the crap out of me. As a gun owner and a gun advocate, it terrifies me. But the root problem wasn't that kid. The kid didn't know. The problem was that the parent wasn't a responsible gun owner. If that parent was a responsible gun owner, that wouldn't have happened. I've been a gun owner my entire life. None of my kids have ever shot themselves. Right? My kids race loading AR-15 magazines, and nobody ever gets hurt because it's responsible. It's something that can be done a right way and a wrong way, but granted, if I just left a gun laying around, then who knows what would happen. Yeah. No. Absolutely. Well, you bring that back to the whole gun control thing, right? I mean, so even exploit dev, they're talking about making it illegal, which is that could detrimental, just like gun control laws, right? They're already doing something that's illegal. What makes you think that they're going to follow the rules? So by instituting more laws, are you really stopping the bad guys, or are you just shooting the good guys in the foot? That's the thing. It's been on the precipice for a while, but much like a lot of the gun control laws that we want to hear, take them all off the streets. Let's, shoot, lock everybody up who's ever touched or even thought about a gun. I saw a poor kid that got kicked out of school because he ate his Pop-Tart into a shape that looked too much like a handgun. I heard about one kid that was suspended from school because the sign language sign he used for his name looked too much like a gun with his bare hands. I kid you not. That's a true story. Look it up. That stuff can't stand, right? We're dumbing society down to the point where we want to cater to the least common denominator, and eventually we're going to be at zero. We're going the wrong way. So you've got to be able to make them understand doing it right, doing the right thing is paramount. Being good digital citizens is important, just like it is being a responsible gun owner, being a responsible martial artist, being a responsible parent. All those things can be done the wrong way. So we eliminate the legality. If I do it in a private setting, who's to say that it's wrong? Now, I hate that we have to even discuss hiding things of that nature, especially because I feel that it's for the right. But if that's the case, so like hack this site, for example, hack this site and root this box. I've created like an internal playground, all of my own, that people who I'm working with that need to learn a certain set of skills, I can build them a tailored workshop to come into that safe environment, test your skills, ask questions with the other people that are working on it, and nobody ever knows because it's completely in a private area. So while we're talking about these tools, these skills being illegal, they're not yet. And hopefully we won't see that. Hopefully that's a bunch of FUD, just like, oh my God, all guns are all bad. You know why America didn't get invaded in World War II? You know that the Germans had submarines less than a mile off our east coast during World War II, but we didn't get invaded, not only by the Germans but also by Japan. The Japanese emperor at the time said you can't invade America because there'd be a gun behind every blade of grass, and that's true. You can't take that away. I don't know that. I don't know that. There you go. So the point being, they've been talking for years about making tools, making weapons, making whatever to be illegal. I hope that we never see that day come in America, but if it does, I'm sure that's the day I become an outlaw. You're going to pry my guns and my laptop from my cold, dead hands. What is it? They already are. There's actually working firearms that you can do completely off a 3D printer. It passes right through most TSA checkpoints. True. Sure. Well, I'd love to keep talking. I'll be around for the rest of the day. Let me go back to this thing here. You guys can certainly please engage. I'll be here. Email if you'd like. You can. I'm phil@philipgrimes.com or hit me on Twitter. I tweet more than I do almost anything else but ride my bike. So thanks for your time. I truly appreciate it, and I hope to see you all get involved here before too long.